Well, Crystal, thank you so much for being here today and joining us for National Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes, it's so exciting. I love this day, and I love 700 Club Canada, and I love the viewers who are watching, and it's an opportunity to tell some stories.
And that's what you do through I Am Compelled. You were actually recently on our show talking about I Am Compelled. That interview is available at our YouTube channel at 700 Club Canada if you want to see that. But really what you do through I Am Compelled is you help bring the dignity of First Peoples through storytelling, relationship building. So given that that's what you do, what is really National Indigenous Peoples Day? What does it mean to you? And what does it mean to the First People?
Well, June 21st, for a lot of people who are kind of being introduced to Indigenous stat days, June 21st is very different from September 30th. So September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, more somber. That's where people wear orange shirts. We remember the survivors of Indian Residential School. But then there's June 21st, which is celebratory, culture, color, the sights, the sounds of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. And I think a lot of people don't understand that these days, I think it was 29 years ago, the Governor General actually proclaimed this day as a day to recognize the solidarity, like to stand with, for Canadians to come together and really celebrate and cherish the First Peoples. And so that's what you'll see all across the nation on June 21st is just events, powwows, food, fiddle playing, music, throat singing. And it's just to really recognize that the First Peoples are here and they're celebrated.
Yeah. And for us, I love that. It's a good distinction of those 2 days to understand the remembering and the reflecting. And then this day is a day of celebration and for us to really learn about the culture and those sights and sounds and for us to be aware of that as well. So how have you seen National Indigenous Peoples Day really serve as an opportunity for healing and affirmation for the First People?
So my heart for my people, because I'm Métis, my dad is from Manitoba, so Red River Settlement. And when you look at the history of my family, when you look at the history of a lot of what has happened to the First Peoples, it has been atrocity and oppression and more so pushed to the side, right? Like you're not valued, you're not wanted. And so the day, June 21st, isn't new. In 1982, they had the National Indigenous Brotherhood, advocating for the 434 First Nation communities across Canada. That doesn't include the 11 Métis settlements and the 25 Inuit communities. And so there was this advocacy that's been happening for generations where the leadership of the First Peoples are saying, hey, we've got to get, a solidarity day so that future generations never forget. And so instead of, coming out of that pain, it's an opportunity to turn the corner and walk together and celebrate and honor. Because I remember, I have a friend up in Niashingaming, which is north of Owen Sound in Ontario. And, it was 60 years ago, his grandmother couldn't leave their community without a pass card from the Indian agent. And so, a generation is 20 years. And so there's this generation that's coming out of pain and heartache. So the only thing that we can do is celebrate, because those traditional, assemblies, those gatherings, they were outlawed by the government. So by having a day to celebrate, it's restoring honor, it's restoring dignity. It's saying, we see you, we love you, and you're here.
Yeah, and it's so important. And even so, given that, talking about that, how can non-Indigenous people or even churches really come together to maybe honor this day and do that, restore that dignity, restore that honor to First Peoples?
So a lot of Canadians, I think they think that they have to, they have to watch from a distance or stay at a distance or stay, but really the heart of First Peoples, that reconciliation word, a lot of cultures, they don't have that word in their language. So reconciliation for Indigenous person means come and eat with us. Come and sit
That's
with
beautiful.
us.
I love that.
So for Canadians across the country, I would say get involved in an event. You know, you can Google Indigenous Peoples Day event in your area. You can participate. You can, you know, grab an Indian taco. You can, you know, go and sit with a fiddle player, because that's a lot of the variety that's out there. For the churches, I would say, you know, model what Jesus did. Relationship, relationship, relationship. You know, maybe you go to a community, maybe you show up, maybe you visit. And when you go, you're not trying to preach, right? Because the first peoples have been over evangelized and under discipled. So don't go and preach, go and sit, go and love, go and ask questions, go and hear some stories, and just be together.
I love that. You brought out such a good point about the relationship building. I mean, for them, that's really what the reconciliation is. Let's build those bridges. Let's build that relationship, and let's just be together, right? I love that. Well, thank you for bringing that. We're going to be right back talking more about National Indigenous Peoples Day. So stay tuned as we come back with Crystal. Well, welcome back. And here we are with Crystal Lavallee from I Am Compelled. Thank you so much for being here, joining us on National Indigenous Peoples Day.
No problem. It's great to be here, and it's an honor. Thank you.
And you've done such a great job in the first part, really helping us understand what National Indigenous Peoples Day is and what it means and how we can get involved in that. So maybe kind of going in a slightly different direction. I think you've done a great job explaining what it is. I think for some people, they may not have heard of it or may have heard of it, but not really sure. So what are maybe some misconceptions people might have about this day, and how can we help shift that narrative towards more reconciliation, dignity, restoration, and kind of address some of those misconceptions?
All right. I'm going to put you on the spot, Emily.
Okay.
So I would ask you, what do you know about National Indigenous Peoples Day?
Well, okay, I might be cheating a little bit because we just had the conversation. Right. But to be honest, until I was working here, very little. And so I had heard it. And I was probably one of those people that heard it from a distance, right? Heard about it, but didn't really fully acknowledge what it was.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I love having these conversations, and I think I can speak on behalf of like the community that a lot of community members would love to have this dialogue, but there seems to be a disconnect where, you know, most Canadians feel like they're forced to celebrate these days, or at least forced to acknowledge. And I keep going back to before the government set those dates in place, there was always a company of the First Peoples who were constantly crying out for recognition and for support.
Yeah.
And so I would say the misconception is they just want to have their day,
Right.
which is true. It's important.
Yeah.
But they don't want to do it apart from the rest of Canada.
Wow.
So when I look at some of the stories we've told, and I've told over 100 First Nation, Métis, Inuit stories, coast to coast, different communities, diverse landscape, gorgeous, just absolutely. When I look at that, the same thing that comes forward is we just want to share who we are.
Yeah.
When I ask elders, knowledge keepers, do you hate white people? Do you hate Canadians? Their response with such humility is always, no, we just want to be recognized.
Yeah.
So the humility, the, you know, the dignity of who they were before, you know, Indian residential school, all of those atrocities that have happened, they were strong people.
Yeah.
We were a strong people. We were a communal people. We valued each other. And so to have this day to stand with Canadians is what, it's so simple. Everyone can do it.
Yeah. And it's really who and what they're about, right? And I think this is the key, is that this is Canadian history. And this is really impacts all of us as Canadians. And so, you know, why not get involved? So, okay, so speaking of that, what's a practical thing somebody could do on June 21st to really not just acknowledge, be aware of it, but to celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day?
Love it. Great question. I would say for most Canadians that I've met in different circles that are non-Indigenous, I would say just recognize the day. You know, just say, okay, It's also summer solstice, you know, very significant for our people, longest day of the year, with the sun. And so just saying, you know what, you know, just release a blessing, you know, just bless the First Peoples. There's 4 million identified First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people in Canada. And those are the ones who have identified. So there's a lot who haven't. Just because they're in remote communities. So I would say just recognize the day. I would say find a story. You know, when I walk into the library, tons of stories just on the front, you know, display of this is who we are. And keeping in mind, it's not just First Nations, it's the Métis and it's the Inuit, all three people groups, very distinct with their own culture and expression. So maybe find something different. Maybe, you know, look towards the Inuit and their throat singing. Maybe you Google, you know, some of their cultural practices and you just take 5 minutes just to learn. And then I would always say, you can always donate to I Am Compelled because we're telling stories on the land. We are visiting communities. We're championing the young people. You know, we've got the highest rates of suicide all across our country within Indigenous communities. Let's do something about it. Let's be active. Let's not just listen and hear and celebrate, but let's do something.
Let's do something. I love that. And one of the things that I love is how much schools are now educating kids on days like this. And so my kids will bring home information, and it's a great opportunity to talk to them also and to learn together about the day.
Love it.
So just as we close, we've got a short time here. Is there anything that you want to say just to encourage anyone, or maybe just share a story of encouragement that would just really help our viewers understand the hope that you're bringing to the communities?
Right. So there's an ancient story that we always talk about. You know, when the settlers first came, they approached them as brothers and they walked together side by side, but then they were pushed down for a long time. And the First Peoples are saying, we're rising again, but not to come after you, but to walk as brothers as originally intended.
I love that. Beautiful. Isn't that the story of how Jesus brings us together? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was incredibly hopeful and empowering. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Emily. Love you.
So for more information on I Am Compelled or National Indigenous Peoples Day or on Crystal, you can go to 700club.ca.